Hello, and thank you very much for tuning in to the podcast series by the New Silk Road Project. I'm your host today, Charles Stevens, the founder of the New Silk Road Project. This series is dedicated to understanding and raising awareness of one of the most important development strategies of the 21st century, China's Belt and Road Initiative. The centerpiece of the New Silk Road Project, an initiative supported by Jeep, CSIS, Magellan Capital, the University of St Andrews and Shira, was to travel the course of the Silk Road economic belt from London to Yiwu in eastern China, interviewing the key actors and academics along its course. We will have to apologise in advance for some of the tangential moments in this podcast series, and also the variable quality of audio footage. We do hope this series sheds important light into China's growing global presence and the significant changes taking place across Eurasia. Mariam Zabakhidze, former researcher at PMCG in Georgia, paints a vivid picture of the country. A country on the one hand struggling with its past and particularly incursions from Russia into South Ossetia and Abkhazia, but on the other hand looking to develop the key infrastructure links it needs to become a key economic corridor and transit hub. Mariam believes that the Belt and Road Initiative may have the potential to help Georgia with this, and we spoke to her in Tbilisi to learn more about it.
Sure. So my name is Mariam Zabakhidze. I have a master's degree in globalization, business and development from the Institute of Development Studies at the University of Sussex. And that's where I got familiar with the Belt and Road Initiative, as I did my master's thesis on the topic of what's the implication of Belt and Road Initiative for Georgia's development. After graduating in 2016 from IDS, I came back to Georgia, and since then I have published two policy papers on Belt and Road Initiative for two different think tanks. The last one was for PMCG, and it was more focused on the role of Belt and Road Initiative in promoting Georgia's transit potential. However, I have looked at this initiative from multiple angles. So my dissertation focus was more on the development side of it. One of my policy papers was focusing more on political economy and geopolitical side of this initiative. And apart from looking at Belt and Road from Georgia, I've also done analysis how Belt and Road plays in general sustainable development agenda, and I tried to see how can Belt and Road support the implementation of sustainable development goals in general. So this is very briefly about myself, my academic backgrounds connected to Belt and Road Initiative.
No, thank you. That's a very useful introduction, and I enjoyed reading your policy paper for PCMG, and one of the things that stood out to me was the importance of foreign investment to the Georgian economy. What makes Georgia, though, in general, an attractive investment centre, and what is it doing to expand this role?
So, if I understood your question correctly, you're asking why Georgia is a good investment destination road, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So, I think one of the main reason is that Georgia is. If we look at the region, Georgia is a more or less stable country in terms of political or economic fluctuations. Apart from that, Georgia has very open economy, and this has been the case since early 2000s when we had change in government and the liberalization of the economy took place. We have very flexible tax system. So from 21 taxes, we cut down to 6 taxes, and the environment for investment is, it's very investor friendly. So I think this is one reason. Second is the geography, because Belt and Road is going from east to west, and Georgia is one of the alternatives to the already existing infrastructure links to from China to Europe. And also, this is not the first time when there is a investment channel coming to this region to develop the infrastructure and boost the trade between West and the East. There have been other projects that started in the 90s trying to put the infrastructure in place, and therefore there is already some kind of infrastructure in Georgia, in Azerbaijan, and in Turkey, and in Kazakhstan, linking those countries to each other. Therefore, I think those are the combinations of several reasons why Georgia could be interesting for Belt and Road initiative, and also I think it's mutual interest, as the government of Georgia has also expressed vividly that they want to be part of the initiative. As in the beginning, in 2015, when the initiative was launched, Georgia was not part of it. And then our Prime Minister at the time expressed the intention to be part of this initiative, and we had this first Tbilisi Silk Road Forum, and then we started negotiations with China for a free trade agreement. So I think this is the economic environment that we have in terms of the economic policy. This is the geography and already existing infrastructure in place, and it is also the trajectory that the government of Georgia with other stakeholders have identified for themselves as we move forward and as we plan to boost our economy.
And how closely aligned is Georgia's own internal development strategy and the Belt and Road Initiative, and has that changed during the time in which Georgia has been involved with the Belt and Road Initiative?
If we look at current development agenda that the Georgia has put in place, there are several strategy documents that give the general direction to how Georgia tries to position itself. One of those documents is the Socio-Economic Development Georgia 2020, and in that document, the infrastructure development is one of the key areas, because Georgia positions itself as a transit hub in the region, and obviously this desire to be implemented, it needs to be supported by hard infrastructure in place. So this is the one thing that there's an intersection between what Belt and Road has and brings to the developing countries, and this is also what Georgia thinks for itself. So one is infrastructure. Apart from infrastructure, and there is also trade. So as I mentioned, Georgia wants to be the transit hub, and this is also very much linked to boosting the trade with not only neighboring countries but beyond, because Georgia has very liberal trade policies with majority of the countries. We have a free trade agreement, for instance, with Turkey. We have a free trade agreement now with China. Also, we've signed association agreement with the EU, which includes deep and comprehensive free trade agreement with the EU countries as well. So to somehow leverage those agreements that we have, we need not only soft infrastructure tools that those free trade agreements somehow enable us to use, but also the hard infrastructure tools. So infrastructure and trade, this is the two direct links between road and Georgia's development strategy that we have in place. However, as there are three more areas under BRI, which is the policy integration and financial integration and people-to-people exchange, those areas are also interesting to look at. especially people-to-people exchange, because one of the main challenges that Georgia has is the lack of human capital and human capacity. And gradually, Georgian students have been given opportunity to get education overseas, and if we have more opportunities to go to China, this will be another advantage. And also in terms of vocational education, which is very much in the nascence and infancy stage in Georgia, we can learn a lot from China's experiences in terms of specialization and in terms of vocational education, because at the moment, if you don't need to have very comprehensive research to see that most of the jobs in Georgia, in terms of maybe like the road construction or any other type of engineering jobs, it requires for the investor to bring the employees or expertise overseas, because Georgian workers are not as experienced as they want them to be. So there are opportunities beyond infrastructure and trade, and those positive spillovers that can happen due to those two direct intersections.
And focusing specifically on one of the areas which the Georgian government highlighted, technology transfer, can the Belt and Road Initiative help to achieve this, and if it can, how?
Well, that's another huge research question that somebody might do a PhD on, I think, because when it comes to the technology transfers, currently I cannot say that there is any evidence that this is already happening, or there is not enough evidence, because this is quite new development. But if we look at the opportunities and if we look at the possibilities, we may find some of them. For example, Georgia has several ongoing projects which are financed by the World Bank, and they are focusing on the technology development in terms of hard technology itself, and also the knowledge part of it. So in that way, I think there are already some developments happening in Georgia, and the Belt and Road could be a very good complementary to already existing projects. So one of the projects I remember when I was doing my master's dissertation, I was looking at a project which is funded by the World Bank, and the aim of the project is to have at least 40,000 knowledgeable IT specialists by 2030, I think, or 2025. I don't remember exactly the year, but if we have that, and if we have digital Silk Road unfolding more, maybe this is the area where Georgia could use its expertise. Another thing is how you, if we can somehow go beyond the borders and try to be part of Belt and Road on a regional or even beyond regional scale, let's say if the infrastructure is in place and there are trade flows, you need to track those trade flows. Maybe in the future this will be done through blockchain, and Georgia has 2 blockchain plants, and there could be another one coming. So this is a speculation at this point. However, this is not purely science fiction that I'm talking about, because there are some areas which needs to be it needs to have some kind of strategic approach, and the government needs to have some kind of strategic approach and try to look at it not only purely from Belt and Road or from human capacity development or some technology development, but this should be part of the larger, more holistic program approach, and then we can talk about if Belt and Road can help the technology transfer or not. At the moment, this is just a speculation.
And it wasn't even a year ago that Tbilisi held the latest Belt and Road Forum in November. Did you? I don't know if it's something you attended, but it's something that I heard about and was excited when I heard about it. Was there any significant progress that took place there? And from your knowledge, what does it say for the future of Sino-Georgian relations?
I attended that forum, and I was probably one of the very few people not from government or not from the business. So this forum was pretty much attended by business people or governmental people. So there was not enough. So this was not some forum where you would have people from think tanks or academia or other institutions going to challenge some of the areas. Well, my impression from the forum, it was very high level, and I could say that a lot of money was spent to organize it. Some of the things that I saw, for example, the forum was taking place in Biltmore Hotel and in the Opera House, which are next to each other. And while guests were walking from the Opera to Biltmore Hotel, which is like 5 minutes walk, you had musicians and some actors entertaining the guests and those kind of things. So it was like that, but on business side of it, what I've heard, I did not hear anything new that I did not know before going to forum. There were several signing ceremonies of the Memorandum of Understanding between Georgian and Chinese counterparts, but those Memorandum of Understandings were already there before the forum, so I knew about those memorandums. It was just showcasing that we've signed this, but those decisions obviously were not made during that forum. They were made in May when it was a larger forum in China dedicated to Belt and Road Initiative. So that is one thing. And the second thing is that there is no follow-ups, and it is very difficult to see, let's say, what happened in 2015. The first Silk Road Forum that took place was in 2015 in October, and now it's 2018. It is very difficult to know, did those Memorandum of Understanding or did those agreements that were reached in 2015 somehow are still relevant or are still being worked on. Obviously, if we talk about the milestones, yes, the free trade agreement, and yes, there's more wine going to China, and you see, if you look at the FDI from China growing, so those kind of things. But I don't know if those are due to this Silk Road forums and Belt and Road forums that took place. Nobody's doing any I don't know, empirical research on that, or even the governmental entities. They don't have this reports coming out after the forum saying that we've agreed on this, it's been a year, we've done this far, and these are things to do in the future. So it is really hard to evaluate what's the impact of having these high-level forums every 2 years in Tbilisi, and how does this thing have impact and implication on the economy in figures. On words, yes, it's good to have forum. You have people coming. Somebody might come back as a tourist. There could be some very localized agreement between like one investor to a company here, or maybe we have other like regional partners coming, let's say from Ukraine or from Azerbaijan, and they might agree on something. It's a good area for people to get to know each other, but I don't know if this is limited only to this, or can we take it to a higher level? This is very difficult for me to evaluate. I don't have any evidence to firmly say that, yes, it had a very significant impact.
And of course, Georgia wants not just to be a transport corridor, but also it wants to be an economic hub with with cities and special economic zones such as Anaklia. Mm-hmm. One of the things that we noticed travelling through Georgia was the weakness of the infrastructure, and mm-hmm. also with the problems in South Ossetia and Abkhazia. How do you think that the stability can be provided for international investors given some of these challenges?
Yes, that's really hard to evaluate because the region itself is quite complex. And if you want to invest in this region, then you have to compare what's happening in Georgia to what's happening in Turkey or in Azerbaijan or in Armenia, Russia, Kazakhstan, and which area you feel more comfortable to go to. So, and then there are a range of rankings that investors could use to see what's happening where. So if you look at the neighboring countries, unfortunately, all of them have territorial disputes. So Azerbaijan have with Armenia, and Armenia and Turkey, we with Russia, Russia with Ukraine. So this is something endemic to this region. It is really not pleasant to say that, but that's the reality. But then you look at the stability, how things are evolving in those countries, and you have the statistics. And I think Georgia has ranked quite high on the safe country list, or on doing ease of business, and on transparency, media freedom, rule of law, and those kind of things. Obviously, this is not the safest country. If you're investing, something can happen inside this region, but not only Georgia. So if we are comparing Georgia to its regional, its neighboring countries, then we can be in competition with them. The other thing is the existence of hard infrastructure in the region, because if you look at the strategies of Ukraine also wants to be the hub, the transit hub, because Ukraine is the second largest country in Europe. Ukraine the territory itself, and there is a lot of opportunities. If you look at Azerbaijan will also say that they want to be the transit hub because of the resources they have. The same goes with Turkey. So it seems that all the countries in this region are trying to position itself. But I think slowly we as a region are realizing that this could be complementary and not the only competition, because unless we have infrastructure in Georgia, Azerbaijan cannot reach Turkey, or if there is no link between Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan, we know that we cannot get anything from China. So I think this interdependence which we have, it has been more hostile. Maybe hostile is a very strong word, but it was not. And if we look at the philosophy that underpins Belt and Road, it's more about the cooperation than the pure competition. It's the narrative of creating win-win, win-win. This could be, if the investors will come with this mindset, then this could play positively to actually strengthening and reinforcing the regional links to the countries. But I think one of the main challenges that this region has is the non-friendly relationship that the countries have. And there is a very vast literature on how the economic interdependencies can tackle the conflict situations, and there are examples when linking countries economically and making them interdependent on each other, whereas there were some other cases on the other. I think if you look at the Belt and Road, maybe even China-Pakistan and situation, and then you have India also part of this initiative. So if we just purely look at the map of Belt and Road, extreme cases when it comes to political or economic instabilities of the country, or for the entire independence of those countries, and maybe having more interdependent economic type of implication on that. But again, this is just the idea that could go. Yes.
And you mentioned strengthening regional connections. The Kars-Tbilisi-Baku line opened, in fact, around the time of the Tbilisi Belt and Road Forum. Do you see this as having really any success in strengthening these connections? And also, to add to that, how does it intersect with the earlier initiative launched by the EU, the Transport Corridor, Europe, Caucasus, Asia?
This is one policy and one somehow thought. You have some kind of infrastructure in place to link the two regions, and the Baku-Tbilisi Kars railway project and pipeline. This has been around way before Belt and Road, and as I mentioned earlier, one of the reasons why China could be interested in bringing this initiative to this part of the world is that there is already some kind of infrastructure. And building this railway has been in a very great interest of Azerbaijan and Turkey, because Azerbaijan gave us very low interest rate loan to finalize the part of the construction works which were taking place in Georgia. Because actually, again, if we were talking about the political aspects and political instabilities, the project that was Traseka project, which initially started working on the different infrastructure projects connecting west to the east, Baku-Tbilisi Kars railway was suspended because it was bypassing Armenia, and it was not considered as not fair to Armenia from the European counterparts. But then Azerbaijan, so they did not give Georgia enough funds to build the part. So then Azerbaijan gave Georgia low interest rates so we could finalize this part. So this speaks about the importance about this railway coming from Azerbaijan to Turkey, and the investors from Azerbaijan and Turkey, they see great potential of it, and so do we, because it can have a very positive impact on trade flows, on not only trade flows but also on tourism, because you will have not only cargo passing through this railway, but also tourists and people. And then there is this entire the Trans-Siberia tour, which goes through Russia, and there could be alternatively done something to the resemblance of the ancient Silk Road, or what Marco Polo traveled through. And I know that UN Agency for Tourism Development has some kind of Silk Road tourism project, and the way So yes, I think this could has a good potential, but at the moment we don't see how it is playing out. How does this contribute to the boosting trade flows from east to west through Georgia? I think this still needs to be operationalized. It's not functional yet, and there is not enough data to analyze how this railway, this alternative railway, can boost it. But I think that was in 2015 or beginning of 2016 when there was like a trial train coming from China through Kazakhstan, and then from Kazakhstan to Azerbaijan, and from Azerbaijan to Turkey through Georgia, to measure how fast this can happen if we consider that the tariffs are harmonized and that cargo is not stopped at every border. Because if we're comparing this alternative route that Baku-Tbilisi-Kars Railway could potentially offer to the investors, and this alternative is to the one that's already there going through Russia, the disadvantage that this route has, that it's crossing the borders more frequently than the one through Trans-Siberia route. So if you're crossing the borders, it means that it could need more time to cross those borders, and unless you have a harmonized tariff policy between China, Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Turkey, then maybe it could, maybe the kilometer-wise it's shorter, but time-wise it will be longer. And just in general, having the cargo passing by land as opposed to by sea, one of the main reasons is the time. So if you cannot guarantee the time, then it's more expensive and it's not reasonable for the investors to use this maybe shorter route, but longer and more. So I think this is one of the main challenges that this corridor will face, not the infrastructure, hard infrastructure, but the soft infrastructure tools. Because by the end of the day, it's all, you just calculate time, money, and then you make the decision based on that, and not based on what's the kilometers, what's the number of kilometers from China to, let's say, I don't know, Germany. If you go through this corridor, you calculate how expensive it will be or how efficient it will be, and that's the grounds for taking the decisions.
And from your awareness, how have perceptions and public awareness of the Belt and Road changed, or even China more broadly changed in Georgia in the last 5 years?
I think this pretty much goes how the perceptions about China changed in the world in general, that they are unstoppable, they will come, and they are now they will be the biggest economy in the world, and let's try to be friendly with them. So whatever the world perception is. But in Georgia, I think people are not as knowledgeable about Belt and Road Initiative or our ties with China as, let's say, they are about the EU agenda and EU's association agreement. People know about, if you will say the Silk Road Initiative, they will understand it, they will associate it with China more than if you will just say One Belt, One Road or Belt and Road. But I think this two big forums that took place, it was very much in the media all day long. So, and you had the posters and you had everything. And I think people know the initiative, but they are not really aware what it is about or how we are involved in it. They would say that, oh, this kind of infrastructure, investment and trade, that's all, but not in details. And also they will maybe know that, that free trade agreement, but they will not know what could be the implications of it. And I think in terms of how Georgians see Chinese people, way back in times when we had Chinese like migrants that came and opened small shops, and it was just a very, small scale trade things that was happening. Then it went on a higher level, and now we have Huali Group, which is one of the largest foreign investors that we have in the country, and now you have Chinese companies operating the mine or operating on large construction. So this small scale, so from this like very small scale corner shop, Chinese corner shops, it went on higher level for the past 15 years, and for the past 5 years, I think we're seeing more Chinese people, more Chinese businessmen coming, and more Chinese workers. And I would not say that the perceptions and attitudes are very negative to that, because in general, Georgian people, with the political situation that we have more negative attitudes to other nations at the moment rather than to Chinese. And it's more seen as an economic opportunities rather than as something negative happening, because I don't think that at the moment we have that many that interdependence on China, and also we don't have border with China, so people don't feel any threats as they would feel if China was on our border. I think at the moment I would characterize it as more business oriented, and of course there are some cases when somebody was not happy with how Chinese companies were acting, but that's not because they were Chinese, just because how they acted. And it could have been, Azerbaijani firms or Turkish. So it's not because of Chinese, just the way they act.
And what do you see as the single greatest challenge to the Belt and Road Initiative in the next 5 years?
You mean for Georgia or in general for the initiative?
Let's keep it focused on Georgia.
For Georgia, I think this is the political stability and how we deal with the neighbors. This would be one thing. And also, if let's say in 2020 we have parliamentary elections, and then it will have a change in government, and this change will also say that we don't want to have anything to do with China anymore. So that I don't see that coming, but theoretically it could happen. But as I said, one of the most challenging thing would be to show the results, because it's been just talks. And I think this is not only the challenge in Georgia, but this is just challenge for the initiative in total, because since 2013, when Xi Jinping announced this in Kazakhstan, it's been some time, and people need to see more results of it rather than just some announcements about the pledges that China made of this X amount of $1 million investment in this country, creating X amount of jobs and things like that. So I think if the countries along Belt and Road want to keep this initiative flowing, they need to start talking about the results of this initiative, and not only speculating about the future and just showcasing of some charts that are saying by 2050 or by 20 something. At least some kind of tangible results that has taken place, not only on a global level that China has been saying that we've invested this much, we've created this amount of jobs and things like that. But each country should take an ownership and show that to their local people, because for Georgians, it's living in the rural areas. It is not about, is this a geopolitical game, or is this China showcasing in power, or this is like Eurasia rising. They are not interested in that. They want to know if their farms can survive, or how can their I don't know, small guest house benefit if there will be more tourists coming, or then things like that. So I think A, it's a political situation, B, it's how we deal with the neighbors, and C, it's tangible results and showing them. Those are the challenges that in 5 years will define how this initiative is perceived in Georgia, and I think even on a global level.
And just one final question from me. If you were going to summarise the Belt and Road Initiative in one word, what is that word for you?
That's hard. I would say infrastructure, probably.